In Ontario, meanwhile, the provincial government is taking control of two major Toronto highways. The Gardiner Expressway and the Don Valley Parkway will now fall under the province's oversight. It's part of a new deal between Toronto and Ontario to offload some financial burden on the cash-strapped city.
It's the biggest historic funding ever in the history, not in Ontario, but in Canada. You know you have a good deal when both sides aren't too happy. If anyone thinks I want the DVP and the Gardiner, no, I don't, but that's our responsibility.
By uploading the Gardiner and the DVP, the city will be able to spend billions more on affordable housing, fixing transit, and building communities with all the things we love in the neighborhoods, whether it's community centers, libraries, parks.
Peter Bethlenfalvy is Ontario's Finance Minister, and he joins me now. Minister, welcome back to the show.
Great to be with you, David.
So Mayor Chow and Premier Ford called this a historic deal. So we've got the adjectives taken care of. I'm hoping you can help me with the math. How much of Toronto's $1.5 billion deficit will this eliminate?
A significant amount. I mean, this transaction, which is historic, as Toronto goes, Ontario goes, and frankly, Canada goes, it's the heartbeat of the economy here in Ontario, is about $1.2 billion of operating expense over 3 years and capital, with several billion as well, which will go a long way to helping plug City of Toronto's fiscal hole, but also with the help, and we've asked the federal government to support as well, particularly in terms of refugees and asylum seekers, as well as some infrastructure like subway cars. So, when multiple levels of government can come together, Toronto and the province have, we can significantly put Toronto on a sustainable path for the future.
Just on that demand of the federal government, you've put your money on the table to match whatever the city is putting on the table. Have you heard yet from the feds on whether or not they'll be signing on to these specific components of this?
Well, they've been at the working group, but they've not been in a position to make commitments. I did talk to Chrystia Freeland, the Minister of Finance, this morning. And this is on the top of not only our agenda, but Mayor Chow's agenda, Premier Ford's agenda, and again, this when you talk about infrastructure, when you talk about highways, when you talk about moving people, that's economic prosperity. At the same time, taking care of people, homelessness and shelter, is also significantly important as part of this. So I'm an optimist. I think the federal government will see the wisdom in supporting the New Deal for Toronto.
On the Toronto-specific components, Mayor Chow more or less conceded that her fight to stop the redevelopment of Ontario Place was going to be lost. So she capitulated in return for this sort of an arrangement where you take responsibility at the provincial level for the Gardiner and the Don Valley Parkway. Why would you want to take on those particular roads and put them into your portfolio of financial liabilities and responsibilities?
Well, first off, Ontario Place is just a small part of the overall deal, but the upload of the DVP and the Gardiner is really critical. Really, we have hundreds of thousands of motorists who use those roads every day. They're an important part of our economic heartbeat, and we want to make sure that we can be able to fund the repairs, fund the good operation, and make sure it doesn't get torn down, because this is a significant part of the economic prosperity. I mean, people from all over Ontario, and frankly, people who come from Ontario, outside of Ontario, use the DVP and the Gardiner to navigate through the city. So this is a critical piece of infrastructure that adds to the economic prosperity. And again, things that we're investing in infrastructure and making sure we can move people and goods is actually really good for the economic health of not just the city and the province, but of all of Canada.
Is that the motivation in the provincial government taking control of it, is to preserve it and stop it from being torn down? Because I know there is a move in certain segments of Toronto society and Toronto municipal politics to do just that. So you're trying to safeguard it here in a way from that sort of destruction and redevelopment?
Well, I think tearing down would be a travesty from an economic point of view, and now it's the responsibility of the province and the people of the full province to make sure they're in a state of good repair, and that we can enhance that infrastructure, because we've got to move people and goods. And if you've been to Toronto lately, David, you would know that getting from A to B can be a challenge sometimes. So the province is making sure that we continue to invest in long-needed, outdated infrastructure, and this is just another example of that.
You mentioned that the Ontario Place component of this is only a small part of the deal, but it's a pretty controversial one. And it seems now that this moves any sort of vocal and loud obstruction at a high office level, certainly in the mayor's office, out of the way of this redevelopment that the Premier is so intent on. So how quickly do you think that gets done?
Well, we're moving forward on that. You know, it's a destination that attracts some people to Ontario, but with the new vision for Ontario Place is going to be a significant enhancement to that. You know, that is a piece of land that didn't exist before Ontario Place. It's largely by the digging out of the Lower Danforth extension, so it's a landfill. And we're going to make sure that's an important part of the destination in Toronto and Ontario. But let me tell you this, it's so important that we continue to invest in transportation, the infrastructure, like the subways. Part of this New Deal involves investing in more subways, public safety on our subways, which is so critical, more officers. We talked about investing more in homelessness and shelters. You know, we've got a big chunk of homelessness in the provinces right here in Toronto. So we want to make sure that we're partnering and doing what's best to keep people healthy, but also for our economy.
Just one more question on the Ontario Place component, because your government says you still plan to move the Ontario Science Centre to Ontario Place, and it's up to the city to decide what happens with the land that is the current location of the Science Centre, and you have control over the Science Centre itself. Mayor Chow mentioned a partnership between the governments to ensure the programming remains effective. What is the plan for the Science Centre?
No, the plan, certainly we're going to build a new science centre down in Ontario Place, so that's part of the deal today. But the existing science centre, that's land owned by the city, and what the Premier said today and what we've said is we'll work with the city as they unveil their vision for what takes place at that center, the science centre that's been there.
You outlined the list of needs that Toronto has, and also the imperative to help Toronto, because as Toronto goes, so goes Ontario, as you said. A lot of municipalities, though, have their own set of issues and would love to have some sort of an arrangement with the provincial government. You know, Ottawa may want to interest you in a light rail system. That's not working very well. I mean, what do you say to other provinces who are going to be raising their hand after this and saying, me too?
No, we've been working with all municipalities right across the province. You know, the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund is now over 5 years is a $2 billion fund. The Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund, that's another $2.5 billion over 5 years. We just announced a few months ago the Building Faster Fund, $1.2 billion, that cities like Ottawa and others will be able to participate in. And the homelessness prevention program, we increased that by 40%, and many municipalities like Ottawa and beyond benefited from that 40% increase. So we've been working with with municipalities right across the province. Broadband is another area where we invested over $4 billion in partnership with municipalities. So there's always more to do, but we've got a good working relationship with all the municipalities. But what was really important today was to work with Toronto and announce this historic deal which allows not only Toronto to prosper, but all of Ontario to prosper.
But I appreciate those other programs exist that are broadly applied, but something specific like taking the Don Valley and the Gardiner off the liability balance sheet of Toronto. Would deals like that be available for other cities in Ontario who might have other assets that cost them a lot of money, but really are provincial in terms of benefit, and they might want some help there?
No, like I said, we've been doing a whole bunch of things, and we always talk about shared priorities. We're putting $185 billion into our 10-year capital plan, of which many municipalities benefit. Like our transit plan is $70 billion, of which $28 billion is for subways, the rest for public transit right across the province. There's $28 billion in that plan for highways, which benefits communities right across the province. So this is about moving Ontario forward, dealing with the sustainability of the City of Toronto for the long haul, but also recognizing how they are a big part of the economic engine of Ontario. And we want to move Ontario forward from an economic prosperity point of view. We want to invest in infrastructure because that helps with prosperity and productivity and lifts all boats.
Ontario Finance Minister Peter Bethlenfalvy, thanks so much for your time today.
Always a pleasure.